So we talked a little bit about, the first couple waves of technology, right? And then we talked about this cultural shift, and Dana was describing a little bit what they were seeing in Disney. These workers now who want data and want to operate in data. But I don't think it's as easy as sort of breaking the chains and just starting to do things totally different. I think there's a history here, and there's a history of some real connections to the past that we need to consider and overcome before we move forward. And to talk to anybody at Looker and to talk to any of us over the last 5 or 6 years, you start to hear about these two things that we keep beating a drum about. Like, we have to overcome the ideas of data chaos and data bottlenecks. I think those are fundamentally what's holding us back right now from moving forward and farther down this journey with bringing value to people through data. And if you consider sort of this first wave and second wave and these pieces that are hard to put together, in almost every customer that we talk with, we hear one or both of these problems come up. And many of you may be still facing that, and others may be starting to overcome it. But the first is this idea of data bottlenecks. I think Dana even referred to it a little bit. It's this idea of, I want data to put into my point solution tool, my visualization tool or something. So I want to do like a sales pipeline analysis. So I go to the data team and I say, I need 2 million rows of data on this topic, and they produce some clean data for me, and I put it into my tool and I look at it and I'm like, oh, cool. I've become data driven, and I'm really like looking at the facts now, and that's really freeing to people. It's really enlightening. So obviously they have another question, or the question just changes a little bit. I need a different time slice or something. So they go back to the data team's office, and this time there's a couple people waiting in line, right? There's a couple people, but it's important. So they wait in line, and then they sort of get the data. And then they realize this was really awesome, and they want to go ask a different question. So they go back to the data team to get more data to analyze and put into their tool or their spreadsheet or whatever. But this time the line is around the corner, right? It's out the door and around the corner. And what happens is people look at that line and the difficulty of getting stuff, the difficulty of the supply chain of data, and they stop asking questions, right? And when you stop asking questions, that whole idea of data culture or being data-driven in an organization just ends. It ends there. And we find that people, if they could ask every question, they might have 100 questions to ask. But typically, they're only asking 3 or 4. They're asking the most important questions, and then they kind of move on, right? And that's a real problem, because either they stop asking questions or they go rogue, right? They really just go do it themselves. I think I can get the Salesforce API to download a bunch of tables, and I'm going to try and do this analysis on my own. But they don't understand the underlying data structures. They don't understand the logic behind how we take out lost deals or something, and suddenly all of that stuff appears, and the number is fundamentally different. So everybody starts defining data metrics and all these little different tools in a little widgy-clicky formula box, and everybody's formula is different, right? So what's lifetime value of a customer? Well, it's 10,206. No, it's 15,000. No, it's $800. I mean, it's like literally we'll go into organizations and we'll have sort of those first meetings where we bring different departments together, and we set up what we call a data brawl, where everybody just starts arguing about all the metrics and how everyone's defined it improperly. And I think that's a problem, because if everyone is using a different view of the truth, we can't be data-driven either. We can't build these data cultures. So fundamentally, the two big problems that we really have to overcome in data and analytics is this idea of bottlenecks and chaos, or put in a positive way, the things that we have to provide for our user communities is access and reliability, right? We have to provide really free access to data, not in a silo, but really across much larger cross-organizational capabilities. And then we also have to make that data reliable. We can't just give them the data. We have to make sure that there's some curation on top of this, that the data makes sense, that the metrics are common, that it's not a Tower of Babel, right? That everybody is speaking the same language around data. And that's That's really hard. I mean, that is hard. But if you do it and you do it properly, we kind of come up with the formula for what it is to have data democratization, to have this idea of data culture. And it's really having this data, providing access to it, and then providing reliability around that. And those are big things to solve. Those are really our chains. That's why we're having so much difficulty moving higher up the value chain in these data projects. We're still sort of just trying to give people information so they could see what happened rather than operate in data. Because until we solve these really core problems in a repeatable way, it's just difficult every time we start a new project. But I think there's hope, right? I mean, I really do believe there's hope. And this is not just like a looker plug. This is a much bigger technology trend that's been happening over the last several years. And the first is there's been a sea change in database technology. So databases, if we evolved the first two waves of data and analytic tools around the idea that the database was pretty slow and expensive and it was mainly for transaction processing, that has radically changed. And if you look, just out on the partner floor here, with Snowflake and Google BigQuery and Amazon Redshift and Presto and Spark and Databricks and all those kinds of things, the database underneath has the capability now to store everything, like really all of our structured data, lots and lots of stuff, without creating a very formal data warehouse, really, the notion of a data lake, although I don't really like that term sometimes, but it's this idea of being able to put everything in there, right? And that enables a lot of different things. But what was missing was a different kind of thinking on the tool on top. And that's where Looker comes in. If you have these big, fast databases, and then you build a tool to greatly simplify the supply chain on top, right? Where you kind of invert the whole architecture, where you say, okay, we have access to all this information, now how do we explain and curate and provide kind of an application server on top of that? That becomes different. So you have these two changes in technology that really enable us to go to the next level, but then even more importantly, we have this shift in people. We have professionals such as everybody here, like who is interested in solving this problem, that's new, right? But then we also have, as Dana was saying, this new kind of worker in our organizations that cares about this, that we have to serve. They're doing their job with it, that we have to serve these people. And I think that's where the hope comes from. I think we have the things now, the pieces, the building blocks to start to solve these problems of access and reliability. And at Looker, again, we've been on this mission since day one. As Jen said, it's one vision. We're not the mission of the year kind of company. I mean, we've been executing against this and building towards this for years. This was Lloyd's original vision. This is really where we started. And it was to build this, what we would say is the third wave. So if the first wave was the big monolithic stacks, and the second wave was kind of the pieces and a bit of the mess, the third wave built not the old way, but on this new architecture, this new approach, this new cloud-oriented, data store that scales so much better. The whole way you do it can be different. And if you think about this third wave, it's about taking those sea change, the big shifts in technology, and building a way to curate that, a way to expose that, to solve this access and reliability problem for users in an organization, and then to provide that to them through our business intelligence tool and other kinds of applications, right? That's really the key. It's really to execute against this third wave concept, because that's when we can start to break the chains. And it's super encouraging, and I don't know that I could have said this 2 or 3 years ago in the earlier joins, but we're seeing many of you do this. We're seeing a lot of you start to accomplish this. I mean, this isn't just some thought that we're hoping happens one day. We've seen a lot of you start to build these operational stores, these big things that you can ask questions of. And we've seen a lot of you start to provide this real scalable curation, this ability to define metrics and have people agree and stop the data brawls and really stop the chaos. We've seen you do it. And then we've seen you really provide that to large numbers of people. 4, 5, 6, 10,000 users, right? Larger numbers of people in single environments, right? So now we have this access, that people now have access. And that's really interesting, right? I mean, so we had the difficulties of providing access and reliability now start to be solved through these new approaches, of which Looker is a piece, right? And that's pretty cool. So if you think about it, the third wave kind of makes it possible, right? The third wave, the new technology, right? That really is an enabling factor. But more so, the workforce has made it mandatory. Like, we have to solve these things. You know, if we don't solve them, we're at competitive disadvantage. If we don't solve them, our employees culturally just say, I'm going to go work somewhere else. I don't, you know, I need to have access to this information. I like working like that. And I think many of you through that have started to break free, have started to kind of move to the next level.